So today I am presenting on the power or value and power of belonging. Super excited to be here today. This conversation is meant to be one of those, hopefully that will inspire you, hopefully it will open your mind to something. I kind of was curious to see how many people would actually show up in the room today, knowing that someone from Figma is presenting at the same time as me. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here in person and in the room. I am super passionate about this topic today. And as I get passionate, I may speak fast and I may jumble my words, so bear with me. But I will try to slow down throughout my talk to make sure you all can understand what I'm trying to say, what I want to convey, and the story I'm here to tell today. So with that, today I'm going to be talking about a peanut butter sandwich, a water cooler, and user experience. So before we get there, we have to talk about why is there a peanut butter sandwich, a water cooler, and a user experience? How is this going to tell the story? How are we going to make sense of these three objects and items? Throughout this next 30 or so minutes, I'm going to get there, and I'll make sure I go full circle on this. It's not super complex. It's nothing chaotic with math formulas. It's me putting together some stories to tell you all a little bit about me, my journey, and the power of belonging. So with that, who am I? Why am I here today? My name is Kaiden Blue Anderson. I use they or he pronouns. My day job is a lead product manager at Nike. I get to wear the hat of a Nike United Pride leadership community lead at Nike. So we have ERGs, employee resource groups. And my gay job is almost as important as my day job. Don't get paid for it, but I love doing it. I am proud to talk about it. And it's something that has really transformed my way of working and who I am as a professional. I love hearing other folks' career journeys. And for my story, it's quite unique. So I have a very non-traditional path to product management. My first job, dream job as a kid, was an artist. I wanted to do something creative. I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. I sadly learned that you don't make a lot of money doing art. My mom was like, nope, you don't make money until you die, and then people remember you, and then you will make all the money that you don't get. So I was like, that sounds like a bad idea. So I came up with a better idea. I said, why don't I get into marine biology? Why don't I study dolphins, they're cute, and become a dolphin trainer at SeaWorld. Did not know the risks and harm of SeaWorld at the time, but just thought, studying mammals would be fantastic. Fast forward to high school, that changed a little bit, and I was like, you know what, I'm really into sports. I'm really into my craft. How can I figure out how to be the best athlete possible? So in high school, I went down the route of figuring out, okay, is athletic training for me? Is orthopedics for me? And so I went into undergrad thinking, you know what, I'm gonna major in exercise science, quickly added a double major of nutritional science, and I was like, okay, maybe this thing is for me, but strength conditioning is also really important, and I can nerd out about anything fitness. So you're kind of seeing the story of like ebbing and flowing, trying to figure out who I am, what journey and path I went on. So I went on to continue my education and flipped the script a little bit and got a master's in health promotion, graduating focusing on health behavior and education. At the time at the University of Delaware, I met my wife, and we both, after graduation, said, where do we want to go next? And both said Seattle. So how do we get there? What do we do to get there? And I got a job as a charter school teacher, 9th through 12th grade, creating the first ever curriculum for health and well-being, which included sex education, which included financial health, whatever I wanted it to be. Being at charter school, I said, what is the most important thing our youth need to know? And so I developed this curriculum and really enjoyed designing and being that instructional designer. Also, it's really hard as you're trying to figure out yourself to be a teacher in front of a classroom of other youth that are trying to figure out themselves as well. So I can talk more about that later, but as I quickly pivot back to fitness to figure out my next job, I become a business development manager at Orange Theory, and then said, hey, you know what, this whole product management thing seems like a really good idea. Watched YouTube videos, read some things, and started bullshitting my way to figuring out how to become a product manager. Guess what, it worked. I landed my first job as a product manager, doing some small business development work in a business here in Seattle. And that quickly grew into being a product manager for a telehealth company, And then magically, within 3 years of my product management journey, I'm now at Nike doing supply chain innovation, working on building a platform for end users, or a marketplace specialist. But I'm not really here to talk about that. I'm really here to talk about my gay job hat and the magic and power of belonging in the workplace and how we can be our authentic and full selves at work, who we are as a professional, and how it all ties together. All right, so now that I live in Portland, I work at Nike, I'm really proud of my day job and my gay job. I want to go back in time now. I want to talk about that peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I specifically remember this memory. As I was walking in Seattle last night, I accepted this conference because, one, I wanted to come back to Seattle, and two, I'm obsessed with Frankie and Joe's. If anyone loves Frankie and Joe's and wants a good vegan ice cream, it's up in Capitol Hill. It's worth the walk. It's delicious. I vividly remember this story and quickly had to add this to my slides, because this was the earliest memory I have about the importance of inclusion and belonging. In kindergarten, yes, some 26 years ago, at the age of 5, I saw the value of making sure someone was seen in the classroom. So in kindergarten, we had a new student join the class, and this was back in like 1998, when they still took your lunch order like out loud for some reason, where they said, do you want a peanut butter sandwich? Do you want chicken nuggets? What kind of milk do you want? You know, the vanilla, chocolate, or the pink one, that's strawberry. And just part of the ritual of school. So I was like, no way am I getting a peanut butter sandwich, because those are gross. However, as everyone went around the room, I saw the new student was the only one that mentioned PB&J, and the child looked a little sad, looked a little lost. And I was like, you know what, if I'm ordering next, I want to make sure this kid feels seen in this classroom. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to get a PB&J and make him feel like he's not alone. So I did. And I honestly don't remember anything other than that. I don't remember the disgusting taste of the PB&J or how it made the kid feel, but I just remember the intentionality of trying to make someone else feel seen in the classroom. So with that, I want to talk about the purpose of power and value. So power, as you can see here, is defined as the ability to do something or act in a particular way, especially as faculty or quality. It also being described as the capacity or ability to direct or influence the behaviors of others or the course of events. Power is different than value, and value can also be defined as a verb, but today we're going to be talking about value as a noun. And that is the regard that is something is held to deserve the importance, worth, or usefulness of something. Also, it's a person's principles or standards of behavior, and one judgment of what is important in life. Don't worry, I will be sending my slides out later, so if you want to take notes, you can take pictures, do whatever you want. I found these on Oxford Languages, so not my own. So when we define and align, it's really important is if we as a collective, we as a team, teammates, organizations, or humanity can agree on a definition, align on that definition. Come back here, slides. Wait a second. Cool. If we are able to have that alignment, then we can be more intentional and purpose-driven with our own values as a team and have guiding principles that we can all be intentional with and about when we have those hard conversations, when we have moments that we need to center ourselves. As designers, as product managers, as professionals, we have our own set of core values. I know what mine are. I hopefully will find teams that recognize my values and I can see myself in their values, and we have a symbiotic relationship. When those don't align, pause. Ask yourself, is this the right space to be? Am I supposed to be here if my values aren't matching? It's a really helpful, and honestly, sometimes it's just a quick gut check, and you have to take into account, do you want to be with someone, dating, relationship-wise, personally, professionally, with someone whose core values are not aligned with yours? So the purpose of this is to talk about the intentionality of the power of belonging, which is different than the value of belonging, and most importantly, the intentionality of belonging. All right, so here's another story. So this is about the water cooler now. So we talked about peanut butter and jelly, and now we're going to talk about water cooler. So I don't know about y'all. A raise of hands. Who started a new job during the pandemic? Most of us in the room did, yeah. It was challenging. So when I joined Nike, it was back in June of 2022, so going on about 2 years now. Nike reopened offices May of 2022 for back to in-person work. My team at the time was hybrid, 3-2, and folks were still trying to figure out what flexibility looked like and meant, and how we as product managers are in the world of digital experiences, do we need to be in the office, if at all, since our stakeholders are global, across the globe. Plus, we're in so many meetings, so many meetings, that being in an office is just ridiculous, because then everyone's everywhere, and I'm like, how do I find a quiet space to listen and talk? So I had to come up with a plan and say, you know what? Even if I'm on so many meetings, what is the importance of being in the office? How can I connect with others and meet new people? How the building design is it's separated with 4 quadrants. However, in the middle of all these 4 quadrants is a kitchen area. And in the kitchen area, there's a water cooler-esque, not as cool as the old school water cooler, but you can picture it, kitchen, water space, and there's a couple of tables that look like a buffet style. And I started intentionally sitting right next to the water cooler every single day for the first 6 months of my role. People started making jokes about the water cooler. People started noticing the consistency of me sitting there. I did it intentionally because I want to get to know people. I said, if I have to be here in person, I want to get to know who you are. Even if you are not on my direct team, you are a stakeholder in this business. I care about you, and I want to know who you are, what values you're driving, and the person, just professionally, personally speaking, if I can get along, can I make some friends? Because I don't know about y'all, finding friends is hard. 1 as an adult, 2 as professionals, and 3 in this post-pandemic world we're living in. Everyone has ruthlessly prioritized who they want to hang out with and what they want to do with their time. So when you're new to an area, new to a team, finding connections is challenging. People say put yourself out there. My therapist is like, all right, Kaiden, go through X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, dude, I've done all of that. I am now sitting at the same table for 6 months trying to make friends. We're trying here. So with that, I randomly got to know some of my VPs in the building, and one of them was doing all hands in January. And I said, hey, I have an idea. How about I tell my water cooler story? And he was like, what do you mean? Say more about that. I said, I've been literally intentionally sitting next to this water cooler here. People have noticed, people have made jokes. I, for one, was leaning into the joke, and I made myself a nameplate and added it to the table every time I was in office, so folks would know that's where I was, where they could find me, and it just became a point of conversation. And guess what? I was able to start and kick off a pilot program with the 4th floor of my building as called Cohorts for intentionally designing efforts to connect communities in our building related to supply chain. And it really was a wonderful opportunity to do employee engagement with the lowest lift possible, just bringing people together in a room to have conversations. It seems really simple, but turns out you just needed someone as stupid or as willing or vulnerable as me to say, hey, this needs to happen, and sure, I have some time. I don't have a social life. I don't have kids. I'm a proud dog dad of 2 Bichons, Bowie and Nelson, but I really wanted to connect with humans, and so I said, hey, I have some free time. Let me do this. Let me build out this program, and I went to the all hands and shared the power of the water cooler and the conversations that happened at the water cooler, and it really was a value add. So one of the reasons I talked to and starting to tell part of the story, I'm going to pause because the second half of the story is what I'm going to get to next. Because there was part of the water cooler in my presentation that really I'm excited to share with you, but it needs to come next. But before that, I'm going to pause and do a little bit of a flip. As we go into this next part of the story, I want you to have 3 hats on. One, as an individual, not as an individual contributor, and I see, as your human self. The next hat I want you to be able to wear is one of your team, for you and your colleagues. And the third hat is if you were the business owner, the CEO, someone that, or just be a board member, someone that cares about what is happening in that business. So 3 hats, wear them all, however you like. But just as we're kind of go through this next section, just be aware of how those different hats look, feel, and fit. So as individuals, teams, and businesses, there's purpose and there's belonging. So purpose, as defined by Oxford Languages, is a noun and a verb, and the reason for which something is done or created, or for something exists. And as a verb, it is one's intention or objective. Belonging, on the other hand, I found it defined as a noun, and that is affinity for a place or situation. So what? Why does purpose and belonging matter? What is the value of purpose and belonging? What is the power of purpose and belonging? And why should we be intentional about purpose and belongings as humans, on teams, and businesses? Just something I reflect on often. And something, as we were wearing these three hats, as I tell this next story, I want us to kind of keep aware of like the power of one storytelling, but the value of connecting as others so we can belong and find purpose with community. So with that, I have a story. Yes, that is me in the picture back in 2013. So you must be wondering, what is this person talking about? Well, that is me, 2013, about 11 years ago. I was a Division I collegiate softball player. However, that is not something I share openly. That is not something I felt confident to share, especially when you work at Nike and everyone loves to ask you, what is your connection to sport? That was in interviews. That was on tours. That is what everyone loved to ask. And I had to figure out, how the hell do I share that? Do I out myself? Do I lie and say I played baseball? Because that's the shitty thing about playing softball, is you can't really say, I play softball, and it's like swimming, soccer, basketball. That's like, could be either way, great. No, I picked softball. I should have stuck with soccer. It would have been a lot better conditioning. But I played softball at the University of Delaware. Guess what? I have a Blue Hen Award somewhere at the university with my other name on it. I have a lot of memories, blood, sweat, and tears, 3 surgeries later, hip, knee, shoulder, that have caused me a lot of suffering, but a lot of pride. But I didn't want to talk about it. I did not want to share my connection to sport. And I had to evaluate why. And I had to say, I am more important than that fear of being rejected. I am more important than whatever someone can say to me. I have that value, and I own my own power. I know my purpose, and I know that I belong. Sure, I don't have a lot of friends, but I have a wife that loves me. I have 2 Bichon dogs that are obsessed with me, and that's enough. But if I want to be successful in this workplace, and I want to have a career at Nike, I have to be honest and truthful. So when I did my water cooler presentation at that global all hands in front of 200 plus people that day, I shared my story. I said, I don't know if I've been truthful with everyone. I know some people may know my connection to sport. But as we have had these water cool conversations over the last 6 months, I haven't been honest. My connection to sport, I said, is I was a Division I softball player at the University of Delaware. After I did that presentation, there was a lot of positive love, a lot of great feedback. Parents coming up to me saying, thank you. My kid is 13 years old. I have friends. I have colleagues. Turns out me sharing vulnerably and authentically was the best thing I could have done. It freed myself and opened doors to more conversations. I still get that vulnerability hangover feeling sometimes when I share, because you never know how people are going to react. But you are not responsible for their reaction. You're responsible for how you own and tell your truth and your story. So with that, I am on this journey now of having this conversation about my identity as a professional and how I can share who I was leading up to this point today. It wasn't easy. It's still to say I have one colleague that's like, I didn't know softball was for guys. I didn't know men could play softball at the university level. And I said, it's okay, bud. We'll talk about this another time. We will figure this out. When you're on a global team, there's sometimes language barriers. Folks have different understandings. So I am gracious with those that want to seek to understand and have those conversations. I'm happy to do that and have that moment of authenticity with that person and explain to my colleague, yes, I was assigned female at birth. Yes, I did 26 years of living in a very different body. Thank God for surgery. Thank God for gender-affirming care that I can live my full truth today. And I'm still proud of that. I'm still very of talking about that all hands and trying to figure out what's next for me in my journey. So that's story 2. And now we're going to move on to story 3, or really talking about that user research or that user experience and design part of the conversation. How I'm tying together the peanut butter and jelly, the water cooler, and UX. So whoever you are in this field, whether you're a designer, product manager, or researcher, we're all human-centered. We're all doing this, and as well we do our work, we must recognize and celebrate our differences as humans, which means we all have different wants and needs. So there's always a conversation of getting what you want versus what you deserve versus what you need. And so when we talk about this, I love to bring up the conversation of equity and inclusion. Some big E and I words. I know a lot of people, DE and I is a hot topic. So I'm going to talk about equity and inclusion, and we're going to get into it a little bit, but kind of keep it to the level of as the space of user experience. So with that, equity is a noun, the quality of being fair and impartial. Inclusion, on the other hand, is the action of state of including, of being included with a group or structure, or the practice or policy of providing equal access to opportunities and resources for people who might not otherwise be included or folks that are marginalized. However, I do want to call out and circle the key word here, equal access, and the challenge of equality in the space of inclusion and equity. There's a huge challenge and point here, and an opportunity we have in the space of user experience and how we're providing opportunities for everyone. So, often, actually before I move along, I want to talk about the equality a little bit more. So, I know on LinkedIn there's been a billion different infographics created about the difference between equality and equity. I don't know if anyone's seen them, maybe, maybe not, depending on what your newsfeed is filled with. Mine is a little bit of product management, a whole lot of DE and I. And the power of equality and equity is making sure we are providing opportunities for everyone at which level. For example, the simplest way to put it, equality is just, hey, everyone gets bikes. The challenge with that is, what if you can't ride a bike? What if you physically are unable to ride a bike? That's not equality. Sure, you all got a bike, but you can't ride it and you can't enjoy it. How we then make it more equitable is providing someone a modified bike so they can ride it. Making sure that folks have the skills to learn how to ride a bike if they choose to. It's making sure we are providing inclusive resources for everyone, so it's not just equal, it is equitable. And as we move forward in that conversation, we can't make assumptions. Because, oftentimes assumptions have to happen on the fly. As researchers and designers, we sometimes are strapped for time. We make assumptions. And unfortunately, when we assume things, we miss out on a lot. We miss out on understanding the nuances of individuality, of uniqueness, of user needs that are specific to the users that we're trying to care for and tend to. I imagine you all have heard that when you assume something, it makes an ass out of you and me. And that's really important. For example, we have an opportunity to do better. And what I mean by that is our next generation of users will be different than the consumers we have today. And so many different facets. For this example today, I want to talk about the future-proofing your business for your LGBTQ+ end user, customer, consumer, because that is a ever-evolving conversation. It's currently a hot topic right now in legislative sessions. It will be again in November during our election year. It's painful to be part of the LGBTQ+ community, and having to make sure we are taking care of our end users is super important. And with that, I just wanted to kind of talk about how we can have today and prepare for tomorrow. With that, today, facts are 5% of the US identifies LGBTQ+, only 0.6, 0.6, which is about 1.6 million US adults in the US identify as transgender or non-binary. Tomorrow, which is already happening, Gen Z is in the workforce. They are here, which means we don't have a lot of data yet on Gen Alpha, but we do know about Gen Z is at 28%, which is 23% more, which is a huge increase, are identifying as LGBTQ+. It's not because we're forcing the gay or trans agenda down their throats. It's not because of anything they're seeing on the media. It's because we're allowing folks to be who they are. With that, 3% of Gen Zers are trans and non-binary. Folks are having the access to care, having conversations, having that awareness. Awareness is key when we're making assumptions, when we're trying to do designs and minimize assuming things about our end users. 44% of adults in the US know someone that is transgender, which is significantly up from just a couple previous years ago. Less than 1 out of 3 knew someone that was trans. Today, you all get to raise your hand and say, I know someone that's trans now, so you can check that off your bucket list or your bingo card. But I'm proud to be that person for so many folks, because awareness is key, and being aware of how this is going to change our dynamics is going to be really interesting. My hope is that we stop asking questions about gender or sex, male, female, other. That's I love being othered all the time, because like, how do I answer that question? Sure, today I'm feeling other. How do we create designs that are more inclusive? Why do we have to have boy and girl designs? Why do we have to have colors that are only specific to one gender? Why do we have to have cats for girls and weird masculine things for guys? Like, why can't we create inclusive designs that are meant for everyone and let people self-select what they like for their preferences? Let's not create a design based on, all right, you are the ages of 13 to 18, you're a boy, so that means you're gonna love X, Y, and Z. Let's stop those assumptions. Let's pause and create that future in which anyone can see themselves in our designs and our work. It's an opportunity that I'm wanting to be a part of, wanting to be in those conversations, challenging the norms. It's an opportunity we have across the board, and one project we're doing at Nike is we are creating kids' designs that are meant to be inclusive. Today, you can go into Nike and see unisex shoes that are meant for everyone. You can just put on your size and say, hey, I like this color today, and walk out the door. That's pretty cool. Same with clothes. They are removing gender from the clothing so kids can just go shop and say, hey, I want a blue shirt. Great. Who cares who you are or what's in your pants? And that's really powerful for our customers to let them choose what they want. So with that, I am not here to have an LGBT plus 101, but happy to give more conversation and context. Like I mentioned earlier, I was an educator back in my past life. I love talking about it. So if you have questions, if you don't want to ask on the mic here in a moment, feel free to come up to me afterwards. I'm happy to provide any context or definitions or resources, really. I love talking about it. So with that, I think we went for full circle today. I think we discussed how the peanut butter sandwich, the water cooler, and user experience go together. As influencers and change makers in the world of digital age, we have the responsibility and opportunity to create experiences for everyone. And in order to do that, we must ground ourselves in these guiding principles. 1, lead with an open mind. Never make assumptions. 2, there is much value and power in purpose and belonging. And 3, the tensionality of being equitable, inclusive is so important. Don't forget it. Thank you.
With that, if anyone in person here has any questions. I'm going to refresh my feed one more time. Make sure I didn't leave anyone behind in the virtual chat.
I see a hand in the front if you want to.
Thanks. So you mentioned the three hats in the conversation as we went into your story, and I totally got the individual level and team level purpose and belonging from that. And I'd love to zoom in a little bit more on the business level.
Absolutely.
What do you think was the business level purpose and belonging that might have come out of telling that story to your colleagues?
Yeah, so great question. For me, as a business, as Nike, when I was telling my story of my connection to sport, I had a hard time answering that because, yes, Nike sometimes is known for more provocative ads or marketing. But when I walked into the supply chain part of the business, I saw very old school, middle-aged folks that I was concerned with how they would respond. So as a business, are we creating opportunities to have safe spaces, to be psychologically safe? Are we creating moments to have, I want to say disruptive conversations, but when you're someone that is a little bit more provocative or willing to speak up, I think businesses have an opportunity to create that as an opportunity. Like I'm part of the Nike ERG, so we do a lot of community-led events. We do a lot of education and resources, but not every company has that. Even if you have it at the company level, businesses within your HR department should have opportunities for education across the board. How are we providing safe spaces, not just for our LGBT plus colleagues, but other folks in the minority groups that aren't being aware? It's like, did you celebrate Black History Month? What are you doing for Indigenous Peoples Day? What are you doing for other folks across the company to make sure you are seen and not just kind of grinding things out day by day? I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning the word disruptive, because I think that it's a word that business folks like to use to talk about business disruption, and I think it's really healthy and exciting to talk about it in this more like individual person level and using safe spaces as a way to create disruption. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Anyone else have any questions?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna ask if you started or like the intentionality about going to sit by the water cooler if you're a naturally extroverted person, and so that was easy for you? No?
I'm a really good fake it so you make it kind of person. So I was a military kid growing up. I was raised in a conservative Catholic household. I moved 32 times in 30 years. So resilience and adaptability is one of my biggest strengths. Getting out of my comfort zone is something that I had to practice a lot. I'm also the middle child of 5. And if you didn't speak faster or speak louder, you were not heard. So some of these traits in me, I had to really figure out how I wanted my voice to be heard and what kind of connections I was looking for. So sitting at the water cooler every day, it felt awkward at first. And I said, well, okay, what is your end goal? What do you want? You want connections. You have to deal with this discomfort to find the things you want that will provide you comfort and joy. I also sometimes have a hard time talking randomly to strangers. It's not the easiest thing to do in the world. So it's like saying hello or making a joke about someone saying, hopefully you're not on camera so someone doesn't hear you being next to this water cooler all day. Little small comments. And small talk, as awkward as it can be, is good practice. Because those conversations happen and they move forward, and sometimes I ruminate on them. I'm like, well, that was a dumb thing to say. Why did I say that? Or I should have said something different. But it was a practice, and that practice helped a lot. So I consider myself a reserved extrovert. I gain energy from being around other humans, but I'm not always the one wanting to be in the center. I like to pass the mic, listen to others, and then usually say something witty towards the end. And people are like, oh, you were paying attention. That's my role.
I have a question just kind of relating to hybrid or in-person versus remote work.
Absolutely.
The water cooler talk, that is like the analogy that everybody uses of the one thing that they miss in-person work. I work for a company in Rhode Island, but I live out here. I was just curious if you've ever thought about how would I like, you know, rekindle this, maybe for employees that don't work in the Portland area or for remote employees.
Yeah, absolutely. So prior to Nike, I was at a remote first and remote only company. And that culture was brand new. And so we started to do a Slack channel called Water Cooler, in which you could put random things in the Slack channel and have conversation. We took that to the next level and had Zoom calls in which people could just come in and out. I feel like when people have an opportunity to opt out of things, they typically do, which is a challenge. Time is of the essence. The success I had with now virtually, during the pandemic 2020, I started a small business called Thrive with Pride, in which I created intentional conversations that people could be interested in, with topics with other people that they would probably find interesting to hear from. And so I usually had a group of 2 or 3 other folks with me to have a conversation and let people, hey, here's a Zoom link in if you want to join this conversation. They were participants, and then participants went to from just like silent listeners to active listeners to engage to then folks saying, hey, I want to be a conversationalist and be part of that too. And that kind of let it grow itself. So sometimes folks need prompting. They need a little bit of like, hey, I just want to be part of something, but I don't want to actually do the thing. So that was like my step into that. So it started with me doing one talk with 4 folks, to then doing a panel of about 8 of us. We had anywhere between 5 people in the room to 1,000. And so it just grew depending on the topic and who was in the room. So I think there's different ways to curate levels of engagement based on what people are needing. Yeah.
So first of all, I just want to acknowledge you for your courage. And I know you did a very courageous thing the first time you just came out and told the truth about yourself. So my question about that is, what advice do you have for other people who don't have that courage yet?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think I had to get to that courage level myself. I think in that process of reflecting, it was understanding what your core values were first off. As someone that wants to go down that path of seeing themselves in the workplace or wherever, you have to say, what value is this going to bring me? Will I expect people to accept me? Do I expect people to respect me? Do I expect people to do X, Y, or Z? It's like setting those expectations. One, I wouldn't say skill or tool I learned from therapy is creating scenarios. It's not like outlining every single thing that could happen, but in your head saying, what is the worst case scenario of me doing this? As sometimes a little bit more of a negative sentiment person, I can say, let's just do the worst case first. On the other hand, then after I do the worst case, I have to say, okay, Kaiden, what is the best possible situation that would happen here? I write that one down and say, cool, I have worst case, best case. And I said, all right, homie, check yourself in the mirror. What is actually most likely going to happen? And that creating that most likely actually has been accurate almost most of the time. It lets you look at the expectations and say, you know what, things aren't as bad as they are. And yes, my utopian world exists maybe in another dimension, but that's not the reality we live in, so I have to be okay with some awkward exchanges or some people messing things up. But guess what? If the best case scenario happens most of the time in that dream state or that kind of what you would expect, then you're doing all right. So kind of scenario planning. After that is finding someone in the room that you can trust. Start small. Don't just go into an all hands and talk and share your story out loud. Find a couple people that you know will be your allies in that space. Having some allies in the room really helps you feel like you have an opportunity to know that no matter how it lands, that you can turn to that person afterwards, they have your back. That's been foundational. I didn't have that with family support. I had that with my wife, and then I was able to tell a couple colleagues on the Pride Network, and then 1 or 2 people I was working with my truth. So that when I finished that conversation, they were able to give me a pat on the back and say, job well done. And then after that is preparing to have that vulnerability hangover. So what does that self-care routine look like after you do something big and courageous? Is it going for a long walk? Is it getting a drink? Is it just hide in a room for an hour with a comfortable, heavy blanket? Figuring out what that self-care is really powerful to help make sure you recover so you feel okay. So that's something within your control. I hope that helps. There's one question in the back.
Hi, I have more of a comment than a question. But first off, I want to say thank you. This has been great. I did listen to you. There was something online ahead of this, and I listened to that. That was wonderful. But I thank you for your courage to share your story, because I think as all of us learn to be more authentic, we subconsciously and consciously give people permission to do the same. So I applaud you, and I thank you for that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Just want to add to what everyone else is saying. Thanks for being here and sharing your story. I do a lot of consumer research, and I agree that a lot of times clients want us to ask gender question, and we don't need to. It's about what are your desires and dreams and all that. But if we do have to ask it, do you have any thoughts on best practices for how to ask the gender question in a survey or in person or whatever?
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. So it's a funky one. So if you are doing research for medical care, it's a lot different than doing something with sneakers. So it depends on what level of data you actually need. So the first question I always like is like, what level of data is actually going to matter, and what are we going to use this data for, first and foremost. So if it's just like, hey, we need to know we have men's, women's, and kids, I want to make sure they're segmented appropriately, then you can create your segmentation based on that. However, I always like to say, like, give people an option. How you use your data and how you want to segment and look at data is really powerful. So when I was working at Plume, that was a medical care company, and we like to ask the question, what sex you were assigned at birth. The key word is sex is different than gender. So if you were able to ask your sex assigned at birth and then follow with the question, what gender do you identify with, it gives the folks the option to be seen. And then you can let them write it in, you can do a drop down, you can do a select all, select none. Allows you to have that data of sex assigned at birth, which I don't think you really need unless you are doing medical healthcare stuff. Or if you are interested in understanding your consumers, how they've aged throughout the process, you will see in the data that kids around 13 will start changing how they identify with their gender more publicly and openly, so you'll see that data trends change. With that, also if you are trying to look at consumer insights, one of the things I like to ask is, if you are doing gender, remove male or female. It's like, look at the different options. Hey, are you a trans man? Are you a trans woman? Non-binary. It's like trying to remove the language of sex and differentiating that between the language of gender is the easiest thing to do if we have to ask those questions. Yeah.
I just want to say, good presentation. It was awesome. One other thing before I move on to my question. I was wondering the exact same thing with regard to sex and gender. I work for a medical company, and I literally just did a form that had sex on it. And you know, our writers were like, use sex, not gender. But
Yeah, absolutely.
But my point is, or my question is, you started the ERG at Nike for supporting LGBTQ, as it sounds. I'm potentially looking at starting something similar. Mm-hmm. What pitfalls should I look out for in kind of getting the ball rolling?
When you start anything, traction is challenging. That engagement piece is really hard. So at Nike, we had the Pride Network, which has been stand up for about 25 years, from the Be True network to what it is today. The cohort thing was a little bit different, which I stood up as an individual, worked with my VP, and kind of got his blessing to run with it. When we're doing something like ERGs, getting an executive sponsor that gets it is really freaking helpful. So we have Heidi O'Neill as our executive sponsor. We then have a senior sponsor and then like just call it a leadership team sponsor. Getting the 3 different levels across the board has been really helpful so that they say, hey, like this matters at X, Y, and Z level of the company. Also, making sure that within the policies within your human resources, if your team has such support, is making sure that's outlined for you to have that safe space. So you know that is a benefit and a policy that protects you to have those spaces. Because the biggest thing with engagement is folks don't feel safe. To make folks feel safe is say, hey, you are protected as a workplace in this policy here in HR. Check, 1. We have these sponsors at each level of the company that sees a value in this, which lets other people feel like they can contribute their time to it. Because so often people are like, well, why would my boss care if I'm here? Or is this a problem with my workday? Or is this going to impact me? So trying to remove barriers to entry is really helpful. Next is trying to stand up a team that'll support you. When I've been a team of one before, it's exhausting. And I often love being in the leadership role, but I often want to be a participant. I just want to make connections. And I often create these environments so I can have that community. I can have that moment to have fun. So making sure you're surrounded by people that want to do the work with you and want to contribute. Last is finding people that want to be part of those network events, creating moments that'll bring joy, creating moments that'll provide education and resources. That's the best way to get allies into that space. So if you want more than just a safe space for queer and trans people to join, having educational resources and providing opportunities for other people across the company has been super powerful. Because people want to learn, they want to be, and if they personally aren't identifying, they more likely have a friend, a child, or someone else that is part of the community, and they want to be there to support them. Hope that helps. Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how to frame this question.
Go
exactly.
for
I'm
it.
still digesting pieces of your talk, and I thank you for your vulnerability. I guess, what advice, I'm hanging on to the piece that you had said about if your values do not align with the core values of the group, like why would you even be in that space?
Yeah.
What about in a business setting where you do feel your values, the values of the business align, that is a space you feel like you belong in terms of that, but you don't actually feel like you belong in terms of you're not like the other people, either in terms of your subject matter expertise or your experience base, your gender. So,
Yeah. Honestly, I'm struggling with that right now in my day job. I feel that questioning my values on the team. Am I the right fit for this team, even though I want to be at this corporation or this business? I think fit is something that we kind of joke about, like, oh, everyone's just like, is the right cultural fit. But it really is important. And it's something I struggle with and trying to figure out, okay, like, how do I then deal with this when I don't feel like I belong? So it's like I would never want to say, hey, it's on you to figure out, but it's like, hey, what can you do for yourself? Like, are you finding teammates hard to talk with and connect with? Are your teammates not engaging so you get to know them and their values? Is it your director and senior directors, the VPs in your business, creating moments for you to see yourself in the teams? If those aren't happening, you have to say, okay, if these aren't happening, are they not happening for a reason? Is there an opportunity for you to leave that team and still be part of the business? I know a lot of small teams are hard to bounce around in. Thankfully at Nike, there's a lot of opportunities across the board. So there's opportunities, so I'm hoping I get an opportunity to say, hey, I one day get to find a team that one, feel like I could belong, and two, to deliver great work. So it's finding the patience, because I don't recommend just up and quitting, because that's never a great option when we all deserve a pay and health care and benefits. But it's also taking care of yourself outside of work. It's finding those ways to fulfill yourself. I love to volunteer, and I can find different ways to commit to my other values that make me feel good and fill my cup if my teammates aren't giving me that. Again, that's putting it on you, which I don't like. But it's always, if you want to be the change, you're going to have to do the change, and that's the hardest part about it, unfortunately. Yeah.
Okay, one more question.
Yeah, I was also curious about whether or not you've worked with neurodivergence in the workplace.
Yeah.
Because we're also going to talk about LGBT. I also know there's a lot of intersectionality with those who are on the autism spectrum like myself, or I have plenty of friends with ADHD.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering if you've ever worked with neurodiversity in the workplace and inclusion on that.
Yeah, no, you can't have one without the other, so thank you for bringing that up. So neurodiversity is one of those topics that people are like, that's a new thing, why are we like adding that to this conversation? But it's been there, it's been around. We need to talk about it. For me, I've had that experience working with Plume. So it was a transgender telehealth company for trans folks. And in the ways of working, we basically had to establish group agreements on certain things for neurodivergent colleagues like myself, I have ADHD, to feel seen and safe in the workplace, which meant, hey, how are we taking notes in meetings and sharing it out? How are we handling our Zoom calls so that folks have time to process? How, when we have to make decisions, are we giving people the right amount of information and time? Some people can make a decision with a split second. Some people need 3 days. But it's founding yourself on your teams with those group agreements. You don't have to out yourself as saying, hey, I have a disability, I am ADHD, or hey, I need this. But in school, you have the 504s, you have different ID plans. How do we do that in the workforce, and which isn't just inclusive of everyone? And it starts with coming up with the group agreements and saying, if this happens, then we need to do this. And then holding your teammates accountable to that is the best way to make progress. I hope that helps.
Yeah, Mike, that really means a lot to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Awesome, y'all. Thank you. I'll be around for a little bit. Thank you so much.